Okay. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be. My name is Neil Pease. I'm the president of the Polish American Historical Association, and I'm delighted to welcome you to another in a series of periodic webinars sponsored by the Polish American Historical Association. And we welcome you from wherever you might be tuning in. We have a special treat today. It is no secret that many in our audience will have been distracted by grimmer matters happening in the vicinity of Poland, and we wish to acknowledge that. But we can all perhaps spare an hour or so for more pleasant activities. And we have a special treat today. We have an interview with Mr. Kent Washington, a resident of New Rochelle, New York, who has the distinction of having been the first American to play professional basketball, or perhaps professional sport of any variety, behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War. He played professional basketball in Poland from 1979 to 1983. And he has recently written a memoir, and it is titled Kentomania, a Black Basketball Virtuoso in Communist Poland. It is published by Amazon this year, just hot off the presses. And I would recommend it very highly as a memoir of a distinctive and perhaps unique sporting career, and also a glimpse at life in Poland and elsewhere in Europe back in the 1970s, 1980s. And we want to discuss that today. And I'd like to introduce members of my fellow members of the panel of questioners. What's going to happen is that we are going to conduct an interview with Mr. Washington with questions from three of us, myself included. And then at about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, we will allow time for questions from the audience. You can put those in the chat and we can see those there. By the way, before I forget, and otherwise I would caution you, as usual on a Zoom call, when you are not speaking, please mute your microphones, okay? With that, this program is also being recorded for those of you who might want to play it back later, or that you could recommend to other people. It will be posted on the PAHA website for playback later. The other members of our panel of questioners today, in conversation with Mr. Washington, Anna Jaroszyńska-Kirschman is with us. She is a distinguished professor of history at Eastern Connecticut State University. She is past president of the Polish American Historical Association and current editor-in-chief of Polish American Studies, the journal of PAHA. She is the recipient of PAHA's Mieczysław Heimann Award for lifetime contributions to the study of Polish Americans, and just to name one among her list of publications, her book, The Exile Mission, The Polish Political Diaspora and Polish Americans, 1939 to 1956, was the winner of the PAHA Halecki Book Award. In addition to Professor Kirschman, we are delighted to have with us Professor Sheldon Anderson, who is a professor of history at Miami University of Ohio, who has done lots of good work on Polish and East European studies, and has also published in the area of the history of sport. just to mention a couple of his books. He is the author of an excellent biography, The Forgotten Legacy of Stella Walsh, the greatest woman athlete of her time. Stella Walsh, also known as Stanisława Walaszewicz, Polish-born, lived most of her life in the United States, an Olympic champion for Poland in 1932. Might also mention that Professor Anderson has another distinction, which is that if Kent Washington was the first American to play professional basketball in Poland, Sheldon Anderson was, as far as I can tell, the second American to do something of the same. He played basketball in Lublin, Poland in 1988. And helped finance his PhD study by playing semi-professional basketball there. And he has written a memoir of his own called Jump Shooting to a Higher Degree, published by University of Nebraska Press in 2021. And I would highly recommend that. I just finished reading that myself, and who knows, possibly Professor Anderson and Mr. Washington can talk and compare some of their experiences. As for me, I am, as I said, the president of the Polish American Historical Association. Otherwise, my only qualification for joining in this discussion is that I was born and grew up in Lawrence, Kansas, the home of the University of Kansas, where college basketball is a religion. And the legendary basketball coach, Forrest Fogg Allen, was my family physician. And with that, we can go on. Kent Washington, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. And I'd like to start by simply asking you some very basic questions, sort of setting the scene. Okay, you're from New Rochelle, New York. You went to New Rochelle High School. You played basketball at Southampton College, which is now Stony Brook, Southampton. And then you end up going to play basketball in Poland from 1979 to 1983. How does that even happen? Just you know, set the story for people who might say, how,
Well, thanks for having me, of course. And it was an interesting journey. At Southampton College, my junior year, we went on a 20-day, 7-game basketball tour of Warsaw and Lublin, Poland. During that time, I discovered a different way of playing basketball based on their different rules that actually enhanced my game. After playing in the Lublin, the tournament, I was approached by coach trainer Zdzisław Niedziela, and he wanted me to stay and play with his team. I couldn't, of course. I had to finish my college education or else my parents would kill me. And from there, I played college ball. And then after that, I had an unsuccessful trial with a pro team, the Lakers. And I remembered that trainer Niedziela wanted me there. So I telegraphed trainer Niedziela. This is back in the late 70s. And through corresponding back and forth, I accepted their contract, and that's how I got there. 1979, January 4th, I think.
Yeah, I was there in January. That was a cold, snowy day, as I recall. And so okay, so you didn't make the Lakers. That's one of the most famous teams in all the world. So there's a lot of excellent players who could say the same thing. So yeah, there's nothing to be ashamed of. And one thing is that you might be being a little too modest here. You weren't just a player in Poland. You were clearly a big star, right? I mean, you were chosen as the most valuable player in the Polish league one year. You won. You were a star for a team that won the Polish Cup in 1983. And this is kind of summarized in the title of the book itself, and it's I'll just show it again, Kentomania, which became a sort of catchphrase in Poland. Tell us how that came about, and clearly you had an impact when you went to Poland that just went beyond the sort of numbers that you would see in a box score, right?
Yes, yeah, yes, it did. So in college, I realized when we were there that the crowd really liked my skill set. I have a very imaginative style of playing basketball. And so I knew when I went back that the crowd appreciated that type of basketball. What I had to deal with was, does my style work with the Polish player? So I had to assimilate my skill set with the playing style of my Polish teammates. And it worked. It worked effectively. Thanks to trainer Nigella, who I think was a visionary that really took a gamble because there was a lot to lose. I may not have liked Poland. I could have left. I may not have liked the rules, the culture, but through him and through my the teammates, it worked, and we played very, very well. And the Kento Mania part came after a couple of weeks of playing. I didn't realize the chaos with the ticket sales that came. I just thought there were long lines every game. I didn't know better. It was my first time there. So as ticket sales began to rise and the demand was unbelievable, we would have 6,000 or 7,000 fans waiting for a game in a hall that sat maybe 3,000 if you stuffed people in there. So they were turning folks away, and then it started with the ticket scalping and all kinds of craziness. And one of the journalists kind of named it Kentomania because it was crowds were in every city. Tickets were sold out very, very quickly. I don't know if the price rose. I don't know. Then there were a lot of photos of me being sold, and it became crazy. So that's where the Kentomania came from.
Okay. I've got one more question now, and then I'll I might have more later, but I'll hand it over to my colleagues. But okay, just some basic data that you're not tall as basketball players go. You're 5'7",
I'm 5'8",
173
Yeah.
centimeters.
Yeah.
And if I look at the statistics, it looks as though in the Polish league you averaged about 19 points per game. But maybe it seems fair to say that you weren't known primarily for your scoring, but for your ball handling and your passing. And I'm wondering if, for the benefit of our audience, there might be another American player that you might compare yourself to simply in terms of style of play. Not saying, not claiming that you're as good as, I don't know, Calvin Murphy or Tiny Archibald or somebody like that. But if somebody knew what Calvin Murphy or Walt Frazier or whomever was, what kind of player they were, they would recognize a little bit of Kent Washington. Who would you say?
Yeah, yeah, that's a really good question. In the book, I've worked with people like Dean Meminger and Foots Walker. And through them, I realized that I had to be a good court general first. And scoring kind of came second, although I could score. But unlike them, I had a very flamboyant style. In the States, it would be called hot dogging, which I don't like that term, but I'm a more imaginative player. So people that see me play recognize that I have an ability that I express myself on the court. So Dean Meminger and Foots Walker didn't play as flamboyantly, but that's the kind of court generalship leadership that I gave.
Okay, real good. Thank you. Anya, Shell, who wants to take it at this point?
Well, since I have some more general questions, maybe we can talk a little bit. I have to say that I really enjoyed reading the book, and I was telling that to Kent before, because I approached it not only as a historian, but perhaps primarily as somebody who was born and raised in Lublin, and I was in Lublin at the time when Kent was a star at Start, because I immigrated to the United States in the late 1980s, and I was aware of Kentomania, but I have never seen him play, which I greatly regret right now. My brother did. I must say that what struck me the most is how honest and authentic the voice of Kent as a narrator was. And what I enjoyed was looking at Lublin through the eyes of somebody from the outside. And one has to admit, 1970s, late 1970s, early 1980s was a very specific time period in Poland, economically, socially, politically, obviously, too. Some of the details that Ken described really took me back. The look of the streets, the change money offers in the streets, the warm Coke. Oh my God, the warm Coke. That brought it back. The description of locker room facilities, stores, Hotel Victoria in Lublin, which was the only decent hotel in Lublin at that time, and the attitude of załatwianie, arranging things, taking care of things. So my first question is, all these recollections are so accurate and just as I myself remember life back then. Have you kept any kind of diary? Have you recorded these things? Did you, while working on your memoir, use perhaps letters that you wrote to your family? Or was it such a huge culture shock that it made such an impact that you just remembered all these details?
That's a great question. As I started to write this book, I had a Polish friend of mine translate a lot of my old articles. And as we were going through them, my memory became vivid. And I remembered every single thing to the accuracy that I wrote it. And there was such an impact on my life that I will never forget it. The problem was to articulate it so that the Polish reader thought it was also authentic. And that was my point. So I did it all from memory, but the articles, and I have a lot of like pictures here, brought everything back. And my wife knows everything because I talk about of Poland at nauseum here. So she knows, and even she would say, don't forget that story about you buying like Gofri or Lodi, something like. I said, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, on the street corner. So everything was so, it had really like manifested itself in me. And when I started looking at articles and photos, it just all came out.
That's
All of it.
wonderful. That's wonderful. There are a lot of really nice details about that time period. I was also struck how well you got along in that arrangement of living in the house with Babcia Kowalska, who cooked for you and helps you with the laundry and kind of kept house for you. And also how nicely you commented about all the work that was done in that time period by older women in Poland,
Yeah.
which was absolutely true and very rarely acknowledged, especially very rarely acknowledged and validated in such a positive way. And I'm pretty sure that this attitude of gratitude and respect that you show through those comments must have been something that you took from your own family life. That it makes me wonder, could you comment a little bit more about your parents and other family members' reactions to your Polish career, and how closely were you able to translate all that was happening, those new things happening to you, to them?
Yeah. Well, when I was going to Poland, my father was, as you know, he was kind of like, really, but he knew I strived to play basketball and, let him get this out of his system. My mother was like horrified, you can't speak the language, you don't know anything about it, but she understood that I was driven by this blind basketball, the passion. And I watched my mother work every day and cook for us, clean house, and she never complained. I watched her mother do the same thing. So my parents work hard. They never had to lecture me or say anything. I just watched them go through their daily life, and I learned what self-worth and self-value are. And when I went to Poland, I noticed right away that there's a lot of older women, like elderly women, doing a lot of the, the physical labor, and it was physical labor. They were sweeping in the streets, the gutters. They were cleaning the club start, the locker rooms. I even say that I could be in there taking a shower naked. They didn't care. They would clean up around me and Dzień dobry, and they were gone. And a lot of the work was done by that. And then when I lived with Babcia, I saw her work relentlessly every day, cleaning, cooking. She never missed any meal. I never saw her sick. She just went about life, and I could not believe it, but I understood it, that this was a cultural thing in Poland, where older women run the public toilets and things like that. And it was not shocking, it was just different. But I respect the culture. I mean, I lived there, I saw it, and that was just part of it. And relating it to my parents, I never really talked about it with them. I really never talked about my basketball playing there, actually, because I always felt that since I didn't make the NBA here, I was just kind of like a second-class basketball citizen. So I kept my career very quiet.
Okay. All right. Now, you were in Poland during one of the most turbulent periods the imposition of the martial law in December of 1981. And on page 207, you wrote, I had lived in Poland for nearly 3 years and had never felt the Polish people's struggle until now. I played basketball and lived among them in the community. The people came to see me play and life was good. It was not until now that I began to see Poland through their eyes. It is a very thoughtful reflection when you look back at your martial law experience of both political turmoil and that terrible economic crisis that was big part of it, and you were in Sosnowiec at that point. Can you comment a little bit more how that affected your understanding of and kind of further integration into the Polish society?
Yeah. I was just going along playing basketball. I never knew what communism so-called was. I was a people person. The people were so generous, so kind, so well-meaning that I didn't realize that communism can give it and take it away. And when the martial law came, it took a lot of things away, and I was now aware what the Polish people were aware of, that at any point they can drop this big hammer down and change life. And what was good about it for me was the realization that I'm Polish. I have to live my daily life like all Polish people do. And that did two things. It made me appreciate the life that the Polish person lived and their challenges and their daily struggles. And it afforded me to assimilate and for them to now accept me even more. And no one treated me like Ken Washington. They treated me more like Kenta Washingtona, a Polish person. And for that, I am very, very grateful for that. I actually went through that experience. Otherwise, I would have just been playing basketball there and thinking that life was the way it was until then. So that was a really great experience for me. I know it was a very tough one for the people there, but I got my rationing card and I changed my vodka and my cigarette coupons for like chicken and things like that, because I don't smoke or drink, but you can change those easily. Everybody will take those.
That's right, załatwianie, another example of that. It's really nice to hear when you say that, that further to integration, that you felt Polish and so on. But I'm also thinking by the end of the book, there is the whole chapter, a small chapter, with your reflection about actually not encountering, it kind of goes with what you just said, not encountering racism in any outward form during your basketball career in Poland, except for a couple of incidents that you refer to in the book. So for example, on page 224, you say, I can without any hesitation say that I lived a normal and comfortable life free from racial problems while in Poland. Polish people were curious, but not racist. I do wonder if you nevertheless felt like an ambassador of sorts, like a person who had to introduce the Polish society to not only American basketball, but also Black Americans, that you were representing, that you felt that you were representing more than basketball behind the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, that came later. When I reflect on it, yes. During that time, no. I just felt as though I was an American. I know I'm a Black American playing basketball. I never tried to or thought or realized that I represent anyone except myself. However, at Biała Podlaska, the university, when I was asked the question, how are Black people treated in the USA? Then I kind of went into how my grandparents were treated or called things, my parents, me here. And I also told them that I know in Polish, there are certain words, muzin, czarny, czarny, and, you know, there's certain words too, czarnuchu, which is nigger. But I was never referred to that. There are a few drunks here and there or something, but I never realized that I was the voice of a race of people until after I finished. Now that I can reflect, I can well see that I'm the only Black person that many people have ever met there during that time period. And so I was actually really representing really Black people, but I didn't know. My father always taught me to behave, you know, to act appropriately. So by doing that, I think the Polish people kind of respected me, and I embraced their culture, and they in turn embraced me.
Again, this is a wonderful book, very well written. As I said, very honest and authentic in its voice. I appreciate that book very much, Kent. I appreciate both your career and your approach to basketball in Poland and all that. And it's such a great pleasure to be able to talk to you directly like that. I'm going to pass it on to Shel right now.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Anya. You know, you raise one of the touchiest subjects, I think, in European history, the tolerance of various cultures. It's certainly a big issue in Polish history in terms of tolerance. By the way, just as a side, when I came to Lublin to play in 1987, there was major, major disappointment in two things. One, they expected me to be Black, okay? And two, they expected me to have the same kind of skills Kent had. Now, I think I could outshoot him, but I couldn't outdribble him, that's for sure. But so there is there's a black-white thing going on there, right? You know, personally with us, and we can talk about that more, Kent, because I think that's an interesting aside. I think I needed to write an article about this because it's a very interesting contrast. But you know, I played Germany, and I played with a lot of Black guys there, and Germans are not necessarily, you wouldn't put, I think a word association, Germans tolerant. Interesting now, I think there's an evolution in Germany, and you would say that, right, about the Germans and taking Syrian refugees and whatnot. But we know the German history. And there was one Black guy I played for, and and we went to Yugoslavia once, and I think you mentioned some of this stuff, Kent, in yours, that the kids came up to him and started rubbing his skin.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned a 2-year-old biting you as though you were chocolate. And and my friend Tom Norbert, he go, "What are they doing?" I said, "Tom, they've never seen one of you before." Yeah. This was in Slovakia. I'm not Slovakia. It was in Ljubljana. Yeah, Slovakia. And anyway, they didn't. Slovenia, excuse me. They didn't see him. So I think the tolerance that you saw there, Kent, and you can reflect on this, was because, first of all, you're a good person, yes, and I think that's most important. You integrated. You lived like they did. You didn't go to the PEVEX every day.
No.
You know, you lived like they did. So that's part of it. You tried to learn the language. You did learn the language. And so, but you know, black people, that wasn't a focus of any prejudice. And I never saw that in Germany with the black guys there either.
No, no, no. I was accepted as a basketball player, teammates, town. I mean, of course, being black draws attention. You know, you're a novelty. But once they realize that you're a human being, a person, and that you're the basketball part kind of took the novelty of being just black away. Now I'm a basketball star, so that I was never approached, and plus the first part, I had a translator with me. So if people wanted to know who I was and speak, he was always there. But I was so comfortable there. I never felt any animosity as far as me being black at all.
Yeah.
Just curiosity. That's it.
No, I think the same. The black guys I played with in Germany would never confronted any kind of racism that I saw.
No.
Occasionally, like you said, a couple of
No.
drugs in there. I think it's interesting what you talk about
Yeah.
in terms of women and the hardworking women. I think that was one of the big contradictions in communist propaganda, that women were equal, but women were doing all the housework, doing all the child rearing. As far as I know, Neil knows better than I do. I don't think there's ever been a leader of a communist country that's been a woman. It was a lot of this, but women, I always thought they looked a lot older than their years just because they worked them so
Yes.
hard,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's very, like Anya said, the detail in your book is really amazing. I mean, what a memory you've got. I thought you had a diary, because I can't remember anything about what I
No.
was doing or games I played. I can't remember.
No,
I'm
I
a
didn't.
historian, I shouldn't admit that. I have a lot of personal questions, Kent, that I think you and I have to stay on after, if you would, because there are some amazing coincidences there. Let me just ask you this. You played against Guardia, right?
Yes.
Guardia Wrocław. The
Guardia
reason I got to
Wrocław.
Poland was because I played against those guys in Bremerhaven, of all places. And you
Uh-huh.
mentioned Bremerhaven so there's some
Yeah.
connections there. Do you remember Zdzisław Rychlewicz? Do you remember Marian Tchaikovsky? Do you remember those names at all? Because those
No.
are the guys that got me into Poland.
The two stars for that team were Jurek Binkowski and Leszek Doliński.
Okay.
Those are the two that I remember because they were the stars, and they were
Marian and Zdzisław, they played for Guardia. That's a police club, right?
yes.
And
Yeah.
I remember the first practice I went with those guys. They said, those guys over there, those three guys are communists. We're not. We're going to play 3-on-3, and we're going to beat them. And it was an interesting transition of being a basketball player into some kind of political, struggle. We won. So it was, but they wanted to make sure I knew they were not commies. Those guys were on.
Yeah.
I got a lot of other questions, Kent. I know that the other Anya wants to get in here, so I'll come back to you. One last one. Did you ever consider the Globetrotters? I know that you consider yourself a serious basketball player. I get that. I would have said, in your position, no, I'm playing serious basketball here.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
obviously, the Globetrotters would have been a career that you could have done for a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I play for the competitive nature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
that.
I don't want it scripted. Yeah.
Yep, I get it. I'll come back later. I've got many more.
Okay.
I got about 20 of them.
Let me ask one question that we've got to get into. It's a sideline to your Polish career, which is that you've made an impact on the history of Polish cinema. You had a cameo role in a classic Polish film, and you were the obvious inspiration for another one. Tell us about that, okay?
Yeah, the movie Mish, I get called into the President Franskowski's office with my translator Wojtek, and they're talking and laughing and gesturing, and when they're looking at me and laughing, and finally Wojtek says, "Kenny, you want to be in a movie?" And I'm like, "A movie? It's got to be a comedy then if I'm in it." So so we went to, it was Warsaw. It was in the spring at some point, and I met Stanisław Bareja, who was the director, and he told Wojtek what I was going to do. I was going to portray the lead, as he was bragging to his girlfriend that he used to play on the Harlem Globetrotters. Well, when he was younger, he was Black and played on the Harlem Globetrotters. And I'm like, what? So we go up to an apartment room, and there is Stanisław Tim, who's the lead. And Wojtek explains to me, he gives me a ball, and it's a plastic ball. So I'm like, I can't dribble this. This is plastic. I'm used to having a leather ball. So I said, well, let me go out into the hallway and just kind of practice. So I was practicing dribbling out there. And then I said, you know what? I think this will work. So we arranged it that I could go into the room and do a couple of practice dribbling moves first with I had a green robe that I was going to have on and then take off. And I dribbled all over the place, on the walls, on the bureau, on the floor, sitting, standing. And when I was done, you could hear a pin drop. Everybody's like mouths were open. They were just like looking at me like, what just happened? So we did it in, I think, one take. And they cut it, and it was there. And little did I know it would be a cult comedy like favorite. I had no idea. And I'm glad I was in it.
Yeah, just for, most of our audiences, probably knows what we're talking about, but this is the film Mish, translated as Teddy Bear. It came out in 1980, as I recall, yeah. And Stanisław Bareja was the director. Now there's also another later Polish film that you're the obvious inspiration for, the Czarodziej z Harlem, Wizard from Harlem, Magician from Harlem. Did you have any direct connection with that, or did that just happen?
That just happened. I had no idea. Years later, I saw this on like YouTube, and I Googled the cast and everything, and way down low says, inspired by Kent Washington's Presence in Poland. I was like, what? But it's not much of a movie, but I'll leave it at that.
No, it's not much of a movie. That's true.
You need to ask for royalties on that, I think.
I don't know if there were any.
We're probably now, Shel, I know that you had other questions. We're probably getting to the point where we might soon want to open it up to questions from the audience. Anya, Shel, do you have anything else that you would want to say at this point?
I have one question, because he's such a basketball ball handler. Were the balls plastic, Kent?
No, the balls we played with were Mikasa, and they were really good balls. So I was very happy with that. So I had no trouble there. The only thing I did, and I mentioned, is every single gym, I used to go out early, and I used to dribble around the entire floor searching for dead spots, because there were a lot of dead spots. So I took a lot of time searching for the dead spots. So I tried to stay away from that.
You're an artist.
I was very meticulous about playing basketball.
You're an artist. That was your canvas. The court was your canvas.
That is connected to another question I had, because I was absolutely shocked at how much you played basketball, not during games, but outside of the games. I mean, the practice in the morning, then another practice in the afternoon, then a game, and then you would always come early to
Yep.
practice by yourself. That was quite grueling. What? Why did you do that?
Yeah, well, the first third of the book really tells the reader that I have a pretty obsessive relationship with basketball. It was bordering unhealthy. I couldn't stop practicing or thinking about it. And it continued in college, and it continued in Poland as well. I told Wojtek that I can get to the gym because I have to be there earlier so I can get my extra practice. And it just manifests itself. I can't really articulate why. It's kind of like I'm addicted to practicing basketball because I know that preparation and practice equals performance. And knowing that, I have to do that so I can perform at top level. So I had a sickness, I could not stop practicing basketball, but I enjoyed it.
We're definitely driven, passionate. Passionate is the word, I think. Yes.
Kent, do you
Yep.
remember what Allen Iverson said? That probably doesn't apply to you, right? Remember what he said, Allen Iverson, about practice?
Yes. No, that
Practice?
does, I
Not
know.
games, man.
Yeah.
Practice.
Practice.
I'm amazed by it too. You're a nut.
Yes, that was that. So, I mean, I tried to drive that through, in the book, that my youth enabled me to deal with Poland's challenges because I was blinded by basketball. So any challenge, any cultural challenge didn't bother me.
Yeah.
And I realized that through basketball, I could get through it. And that's why I have to give trainer Nigella a lot of credit because this experiment could have gone wrong quickly. Any Black person hearing Kunta Kinte chanted, they may have left. I mean, and the rules were vastly different back then. And a lot of players, Black or white, would have just left. So I think that my passion and trainer Nigella's insight and his vision to have me play with his team and have it collaborate was, I guess, almost genius. And we are tied at the hip, with this. I think I reflect saying that this could have gone wrong, but thank goodness the experiment worked.
Do you think you had impact on other Polish players, professional players? Did they pick up some of your style? Did they credit any changes that they might have introduced to the style of your playing?
Wow, I don't know. That's a question for them. Would they ever admit that? I don't know. I know that I was invited to the national team camp by trainer Swiatek for my basketball work ethic and skill to kind of rub off on the national team. That was his idea of being around me. They would see how hard I worked and my skills and my ball handling drills, and they would also want to be like me, I guess. But I loved that. Was a great week. I almost fell off a cliff, but that was a great week. Yeah.
Maybe it's time at this point to, yeah, if there's any time at the end, the panel can ask more questions, but maybe it's time to open it up to the audience. We have had a few questions come in on chat, and you can continue to put questions on chat if you like, and we'll relay them to Kent. Kent, Carl Kalenda has asked a number of questions, some of which we've touched on, but maybe if you would want to add anything, where are you now? Well, we know you're in New Rochelle, New York, outside of the city. What are you doing? To what degree do you speak Polish?
Okay.
Did you develop a taste for Polish cooking? Yeah.
Okay. Mhm.
And things about your family, if there's anything else you would want to add about.
Okay. I'm 67 years old. I'm retired from basketball and education. I love retirement. I have a daughter that's 30 years old. She lives in Holland now. Her name is Kelly, Kehli. I'm married to a Swedish woman, Suzanne, and she works. She's a little bit younger than I am. Well, since my wife is Swedish, we have Swedish cuisine, but I still like Polish food, of course. The soup, borscht, pierogi. I like bigos, although she doesn't make it, but I like that. And mówi po polska bardzo mało, ale rozumiesz mało też. But I do pronounce pretty good certain things. When I spoke there, I was grammatically incorrect, but I could make myself understood. And I acquired an ability to pronounce words correctly. Things like Zbigniew Fischneck. That was one of my players. That was a hard name to say. Górnik Wałbrzych and Wybrzeże Gdańsk and Resovia Rzeszów, all of these words. So I picked up the way to pronounce words, and then I started to turn my radio on at night and leave it on and subconsciously learn more words. And then being in Poland, all you hear are Polish words and a lot of curse words too. So I learned those first, of course, playing basketball. But I guess I answered most of the question.
Yeah, I can remember my first time to Poland. My Polish roommates, they made sure that the first words I learned were words that you could not, print or anything. Those
exactly.
are the most important. Pien Veerstig, who is the executive director of PAHA, asks a question, and to a certain extent, this has been touched on, but she asked about, what would you say is the impact of your career? Do you think it inspired, Polish kids to play basketball, or did it popularize the sport in Poland to a greater degree?
Yes, I don't know about the kids. I can't speak for that, but there was, with Kento Mania, brought a new type of spectator. We had busloads of people from outside of like Lublin who weren't basketball fans. They just wanted to see the event, and they wanted to see Ken Washington because they read about it and or heard from somebody about it. So we drew a different type of fan, not just us, a lot of the cities. And I understood this now because a lot of journalists in each town was saying that there are different people coming to the games. So when we played away, there was sometimes chants of Washington. And it was unusual because the hometown fan was being out-chanted by just basketball fans of mine. So we never felt sometimes truly away. And it was kind of weird, but I kind of see it now as the kind of humbly, the Tiger Woods effect, where people who aren't golf fans watch golf just to watch Tiger. So people who weren't really like basketball fans just came to watch this kind of phenomena, Ken Washington play. So I brought that kind of popularity. I don't know if more kids started playing basketball. I wouldn't dare say that.
Yeah, following up on that, did you sense any resentment at all from teammates or other, opposing Polish players? Oh, here's this American, he's the big star, and he's muscling in on our thing. Was there anything like that?
Retrospectively, I read a couple of articles, and Zbigniew Bichner was a guard who played with us, was asked whether he liked me being there, and he said it was great because we made more money with more fans and more popularity. So our teammates didn't see Kenny as a problem. He helped popularize basketball. We sold a lot more tickets. Incentive bonuses were higher. Now, opponents, I know that Kiefsky wasn't crazy about me at first. He was the star guard for the national team, a great player, Evgeny Kiefsky. He had said to a reporter that Kenny Washington's no big deal. There's tons of players like him in the USA. And he's right. There are better players in the USA. But he did show a side of himself. And me and him faced off a lot of times, and he's a great player. But we learned to like each other more at the national team camp. That's where we could kind of talk and kind of get work through things. Other players, I never felt any animosity from them, but who knows what's going on inside somebody's head.
Sure. I'll continue to invite questions from the audience, and perhaps Professor Kirschmann or Professor Anderson would have some other things that they'd want to try to get in. I just have one more that I'd kind of like to get on the table, and you've sort of addressed this, but many times in interviews and in the book, you say, my years in Poland, your years in Poland, were the most important period of your life. And also kind of a poignant idea, and you sort of touched on it, that you didn't realize that there was anything historic or groundbreaking about your career until somebody reached out to you and made this point and said, hey, you've got to tell this story. Could you amplify on that? Because I think those are two of the points that come out of the book that stick most with the reader or have the most impact.
Yes. Yeah, I had no idea. I was just playing basketball. I mean, who knew? Everybody thought I was crazy. You're going to Poland? Like, are you like out of your mind? You got an agent? I'm like, who's going to represent me going to Poland? So it was something that I was doing to fulfill my passion solely, playing basketball. I didn't care where it was. And at the age of 65, Dorota O. Eglund, who's a Polish Norwegian journalist, we contacted each and she asked me, do I realize what a legendary figure I am abroad in Poland? I said, legendary? No. I mean, really? She said, yeah. She said, does like New Rochelle know that this is historical? What you did is historical. And then I went, I never even thought about it. She said, yeah. She said, Mish is a historical film. You were the first American. And I started to think about it, and she encouraged me, you need to write this down. You need to write your story down. So I began to write the Polish part first. And when I was done, I said, well, this didn't happen in a vacuum. What came before Poland? That's when I wrote about my grade 6 through college obsession with the practicing and different people that helped me through, coaches, my parents, of course, he was a tremendous influence. Kurt Washington, my older brother, Coach Lezak, tremendous influence. So through somebody else telling me that this was historical, awakened the author in me that I never knew I even had.
Okay. We do have another question, and Larry Romance from the Washington, D.C. area, and I'll just interject a personal note here. Larry and I studied in Poland together back in the early 70s, and we used to argue hoops, Kansas against University of Minnesota. Larry asks, did any of your family, from the States come to see you play in Poland or Sweden, wherever?
No, Larry needs to read the book. It's in the book, Larry. No, I mean, Poland, absolutely not. Sweden, no. My parents, old school, they don't travel. You're at that time, you're a typical Black American middle-class parents. They just work for a living. That's all they do. They get their 2 weeks of vacation and we go to Maine or Virginia, to do something. So they had no idea, except through the articles I sent, which they couldn't read anyway, of my impact in Poland or in Sweden as well. I had a tremendous impact in Sweden as well. It just wasn't historical, but they had no idea. When my mother read this book, she was like, "Who are you?" She had no idea.
And when I went to Poland in '87, my mother had the same reaction, like, you're going to behind the Iron Curtain? My dad thought it was cool, to do that, research and play ball. But you mentioned, and I spent a lot of time in East Germany, which is probably the most totalitarian of all the communist countries. I don't like the use of that term, but anyway, you mentioned, the dreaded black market I'm curious why you use that adjective, because when I went to Poland, it was like, hey, that's what you do. In East Germany, you're a little more careful. We did it there too, but you're a little more careful. But in Poland, it's like going to a free country, I'm curious why you use that term dreaded, because you were told when you went the first time not to change money and so on?
Yes. When we went as a college, the mayor and the town council in Southampton were all Polish. And when we had the team meeting with the mayor, they emphasized, do not deal with the black market. It is dreaded. It is illegal. Do not exchange money on the streets at all. This was back in college. We're 20 years old. So we're like, okay, because that sounded serious. You're in a communist country. Do not exchange money. That's the one thing you do not do. Take tube socks, take things to the trade, or do not exchange money. So first
But you
thing
did
we did was exchange money, because the waiters are so good at it. I mean, you could not do it. Our
have one more
coaches were
question.
doing it too.
A follow-up question, did Poles talk to you much about the communist system? Or about the Soviet Union and, about that history of oppression from the Soviets?
No,
Did they-
the only time I knew anything about the influence of like Russia was when, as college students, we were at a church, and our translator, Ava, outside gathered us all, and she kind of almost whispered that, Poland is very much influenced by Russia, blah, blah, blah. But it was almost a whisper. And we all really didn't know what the heck she was talking about anyway. But she named all except the satellite countries and said it's Poland, the Czechoslovakia, blah, 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 blah. But that's the only time. My translator, Wojtek, would use words like state regulation when we were in a store. I was looking at the store, and there was like, there were things there, but they were all all the exact same thing. There was no kind of like competition, nothing, and it was drab, and it was same. So he kind of said, it's regulated, work hours, salary, you have a job for life. If you sell one thing or 500 of them, doesn't matter. So Wojtek kind of explained some things to me, but it just, it's nothing that I really digested. I heard, but I really didn't understand it until martial law. That's when it hit me. That's when it hit me.
Neil, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I do need to unmute myself, yes. We schedule these for an hour, and we don't want to try people's Zoom tolerance. We're into overtime already.
Okay.
Just wondering if there is anything any parting words that you'd like to share with us, that answer a question that you wish we'd asked.
Well, the reason I wrote Kenthomania was it was mainly aimed at the Polish reader, really. I wanted the Polish reader of any generation to see Poland through my eyes, and that I wanted the message was that we embraced each other, that communism is not an indictment on the people that lived there. They're people, and they were kind and loving and considerate, concerned. So I wanted my book to bring that out, and I've gotten a lot of feedback of people saying that, it was a dark time, but you didn't look at it that way. And that's because, one, I wasn't Polish, and two, when I did, I saw it as an experience that was everlasting. So the book is really written for the Polish reader. I hope my American friends that read it got an inside look of what communism, and I use the quotations, feels like and looks like. But I wanted the message to be that we embraced each other. Like, I wasn't a missionary saving Poland. They were actually saving me.
Okay.
That's beautifully said, Ken. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
The
you.
book again, Kent Washington's memoir, Kentomania, a basketball virtuoso in communist Poland, published by Amazon, available online. I think I can speak for those of us who have read the book that we liked it a lot. We think it's a very valuable edition. It tells us a lot about sport. It tells us a lot about Polish life back then. And it tells a very human story as well. And it can be recommended on a lot of levels. You know, it's been an honor having you as our guest, and we wish you all the best in the future, and a pleasant, happy, fulfilling relocation. And thanks to Professors Anderson and Kirschman and our entire audience. And we wish everybody a pleasant weekend, and we will be seeing you in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Kent, could you stay on for a second?